what is your research process? Because your books are each in such a different place and such different characters and all that. And so specific, like in this scene, you're talking about how she's like, making candles, which I was hearing that being like, oh, so Louise had to learn how to make candles. Probably watched about 10 hours of YouTube videos about it if she didn't
Right?
do it
No, it's
herself.
totally. Thank goodness for YouTube. I don't know what any of us would do without it.
Yeah.
I mean, my research process is intense and I just read everything I can possibly get a hold of. Definitely trying to look for historical text as much as I can. That was another sort of thing that I cursed myself as I was writing this book because it is so different from any of the other books and required learning a completely, I mean, Australian history is wild and it is so different from anything that we learn here in the United States. Like it's a crazy place. And I'm glad that I learned it, but it was a lot. It was a lot of work.
There's just not the body of text that readers are as familiar with. Like with Regency, you as the author do have to learn a lot, but you also know that the reader probably is going to know some of the
Yeah.
basics.
Yes. Yes. And for this, you really do. That's a good point. You really do have to you have to educate the reader with enough of that history that they understand what's going on. It was the same way for my second book, which is set in British Honduras or current day Belize. How do you like balance that sort of history lesson with the romance and then everything else is can be really tricky. You
Yeah.
don't lose readers along the way, but so that they can kind of feel like they're in this place, that's so different and so magical and amazing. Like Australia is an amazing place. So I wanted to do it justice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get inspired from doing research to set your books in those places, or did you decide, oh, I want to write about that place? Let me go do all the research?
The second book, the one that's set in Belize and it's in Yucatan and Belize, which are close to each other. That one I did. I that is a place that I've traveled to a lot and it's a near and dear to my heart kind of a place. And I really found myself wondering, like, what was it like there in 1820? So that's kind of sparked that book. And, what if my Scottish Earl visited? Like, that'd be cool. This one was more like, well, Michael was sentenced to Australia, so that's where he's at. And if I want to write his redemption story, that's kind of where I've got to go. I am very lucky. I'm good friends with Olivia Fleur, who's another historical romance author, and she was able to beta read and really coach me through. She's from Australia, coach me through a lot of that. If I didn't have her, I probably wouldn't have dared to write a book set in Australia, to be honest, because I've never actually been there.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
goodness for her.
That's fantastic. We spoke to Olivia, listeners. If you haven't listened to her episode, I don't remember what number it was, but you can go listen to her episode.
She's amazing.
Yeah. So another interesting thing from your bio that you said is you define your time frame as the early industrial age. Is that because you're going to all these places and so saying Regency or Victorian kind of it loses its power when you're not in Britain?
Yes, sort of. It's also, again, to give readers this cue that if they buy my book, they're not buying a Regency romance. Reading because I've had so much reader feedback that, hey, this isn't really a typical Regency romance. This is closer to historical fiction. So it's sort of me trying to cue that. I think the subject matter of my books is also a lot of it centers around the Industrial Revolution and colonization and sort of that economic like upheaval that was going on at that time, which isn't really encompassed in a lot of Regency romance. So it's kind of trying to give readers an idea of, again, what they're getting themselves into when they open one of my books.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because since I researched the Regency period, I know that there
Right.
was all this stuff going on that was this upheaval of the economics and the social order and all of that. But the books that kind of define the genre have all this upper class that seems immune to change and like kind of is like,
Yes.
this is how things have been done, which isn't even true for the upper class, but still there's a
Right.
sense of this timelessness to it.
Yes. Yeah. And nobody ever asks like, oh, where did the sugar that we're putting in our tea come from?
Right.
Which people were asking at that time. Like they were
Yeah.
thinking about that. They were thinking about, abolition and they were even starting to think about women's rights and a lot of things. But yeah, that doesn't get in. And I think I mean, for me too, I've always been fascinated by like the romantic movement, like the Shelleys. I take a lot
Yes.
from Percy and Mary Shelley, a lot from their biographies and just their circle of friends and that whole artistic movement that was going on at that time, I feel like is lost in a lot of kind of more mainstream Regency romance. So
Yeah,
yeah,
there was
I
a
guess that's
lot
why I
going on.
define myself a little differently because I just want people to know, getting something different.